"Sir, you need to come with us." The words weren't loud. They didn't have to be. Because the moment two uniformed airline security officers stood over Dr. Elias Monroe, seated calmly in first-class seat 2A. The entire cabin turned silent. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't even touched the glass of water on his tray. His copy of The Atlantic still rested unopened on his lap. Yet somehow, he was the problem. A white man in a cream suit waited patiently in the aisle. Champagne already in hand, his seat. Elias's seat, reassigned without warning. The flight attendant's voice followed next. Crisp. Detached. "You've been moved to 8C, sir. It's standard airline policy. Mr. Whitley is a platinum-tier partner." Elias didn't argue. He stood and walked toward the back quietly, methodically passing the man who had replaced him without so much as a glance. But what no one realized was this. The man in 2A had just disrespected the wrong passenger, because Elias Monroe didn't fight with fists. He fought with systems. And in less than 10 minutes, 3 airlines would face consequences they couldn't undo. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from and if this happened in front of you. What would you do? Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what comes next. Elias Monroe didn't protest. He didn't argue. He didn't say a single defiant word as he moved down the narrow aisle from first class to economy. Not because he agreed, not because he lacked power, but because he understood power better than anyone else in that cabin. He had built systems to audit governments, detect banking fraud, and quietly dismantle surveillance networks across continents. Power was not always loud. In fact, true power rarely announced itself. The overhead bins were nearly full when Elias reached row 8C. He gently lifted his briefcase, slid it beneath the seat in front of him, and sat down without adjusting his posture. The woman beside him glanced up from her e-reader. Late 30s. Business casual. Her eyes scanned him briefly, lingering on the tailored navy blazer, then darting away when they met his. Elias gave her a nod, polite, unfazed. But inside, something ancient stirred. Not rage, not pride, calculation. Because when systems treat you as invisible, you study them until you see how they breathe. Up in 2A, Richard Whitley, the white executive who had displaced Elias, swirled champagne in his glass like he owned the sky. His legs stretched. His armrest extended fully across the shared divide. He didn't once look back. And he didn't have to. Because the system had always made room for him. Elias shifted slightly and retrieved something from the inside of his coat, a black phone. Unbranded. Matte. Not his personal device. This one had no social apps, no voicemail, just one function oversight. Sky Shield Protocol. A system he'd spent 12 years designing, refining, and launching in silence. It wasn't a public app. Not yet. But it connected in real time to FAA compliance databases, airport ethics logs, and live behavior monitoring feeds from dozens of terminals and tarmacs across the country. He tapped the screen. Fingerprint recognized. Voice confirmation unlocked. User Dr. Elias Monroe access. Level 1A Architect Tier System status, active satellite uplink confirmed. Begin incident review, Flight 611, Aurelia Air. The phone vibrated once, then began pulling live footage from gate cameras, aisle recordings, and flight manifests. Everything was time-stamped and legally recorded. Row 2C had a passenger who'd been discreetly filming the entire encounter. His footage uploaded directly to the server. Crystal clear. Kelsey Danner's voice, the flight attendant, saying, "Mr. Whitley is a priority guest." Elias's voice, measured, calm. I was boarded early and paid in full. Security's voice. Please don't escalate. Sir, none of it looked good for the airline. But SkyShield didn't just react to single incidents. It hunted patterns. As the data compiled, cross-references emerged. 3 previous complaints had been filed against Kelsey Danner in the past 18 months. 2 involved seat downgrades of passengers of color without transparent explanation. 1 involved verbal bias during boarding, quietly settled. Pattern match confidence, 88.3%. The system flagged it for Tier 2 review. Passenger Impact Index, 7.2/10. Bias escalation probability, moderate to high. Recommended action, ethics intervention protocol. Elias didn't look around. He didn't breathe differently. He simply tapped the Initiate Protocol button. A single red light blinked at the top of his phone. Suspend route expansion initiated FAO notification, pending 12 major airports notified ethics alert issued for Aurelia. Air route access review, LUMV. The dominoes began to fall in silence. No one around him noticed. To the world, he was still just a demoted first-class passenger sipping water in 8C. But within 90 seconds, the following had occurred. JFK, ATL, LAX, DFW, O'Hare, Logan, Charlotte, Phoenix, Denver, and San Francisco airports had received live alerts to monitor all Aurelia Air flights in real time. A compliance warning was issued to Aurelia's Board-Level Oversight Division. The FAA Ethics Division had been pinged 46 times in 37 minutes. Back in 2A. Richard Whitley was asleep, reclined, mouth open, blanket pulled to his chin, the champagne glass now empty beside him. He had no idea the sky was shifting beneath him. Elias returned the black phone to his jacket and closed his eyes. The hum of the plane faded to a whisper. 2 hours later, as the plane taxied into Seattle-Tacoma Airport, the crew prepared for standard deboarding, but Elias didn't reach for his bag. Not yet. He opened his briefcase for the first time on that flight. Inside was a 300-page policy paper titled Passenger Ethics Index Mandatory Adoption Proposal for all FAA-certified carriers. Author, Dr. Elias Monroe. He turned to the final page. A single blank line awaited his signature. He clicked the pen in his jacket and signed. The war had begun. The moment the pen tip scratched the final page of the ethics proposal, Elias Monroe knew there was no going back. He had written hundreds of white papers in his career on artificial intelligence risk, regulatory compliance, and institutional surveillance. But this one was different. It wasn't meant for discussion. It was a weapon, a scalpel, a silent system of accountability so precise that it didn't need to make noise to cut deeply. The ink dried. The wheels touched down, and 3 networks began to ripple FAA, DOT, and SkyShield, each receiving an encrypted transmission from Elias's private node. Ethics Framework. Proposal Submitted Distribution List. FAA. Ethics Liaison. DOT Compliance Oversight. SkyShield. Tier 1 Watch. Ethics Review. Committees at 12 domestic airports, but even more importantly, it triggered the quiet upload. SkyShield's back end began cross-referencing years of seating manifest overrides, crew behavior anomalies, and unresolved passenger complaints, scanning for bias patterns using a neural confidence matrix developed by Elias himself. The results. Staggering. Aurelia Air had over 314 red-flagged instances in the last 26 months, of which 84% involved a person of color being reassigned from a premium seat to economy. And even more damning, 89% of those reassigned passengers were traveling alone. 61% had been platinum members of competing airlines, 0 had received compensation above $100, and as SkyShield matched this data with internal crew logs, one name kept reappearing like a ghost in a faulty circuit: Kelsey Danner. Kelsey? Same flight attendant. Same smile. Same quiet reassignments with no apology. But now the pattern had a pulse. Inside the secure SkyShield node, a red digital badge lit up Behavioral Bias Index exceeded automated alert sent to FIA Compliance Hub recommendation, halt route expansion, next review 4 hours. Elias closed the briefcase and stood as the seatbelt sign blinked off. The passengers around him stirred, none of them aware that the man in the navy blazer had just weaponized policy in real time. As he stepped off the plane, he passed the cockpit and glanced sideways. Captain Jennings gave him a hollow nod. Whether she knew what had happened or not didn't matter. It was already above her pay grade. Outside Gate B11, a man in a gray windbreaker waited with a clipboard. He held no badge, no sign, but when Elias approached, the man simply said, "Vehicle is waiting." Elias followed without a word. In the black sedan, a young agent from the Department of Transportation sat holding a secure tablet. Her posture was composed, but her voice had a tension to it. "Good evening. Dr. Monroe, your submission was escalated. Tier 1 flag. Command review is live." Elias nodded, then spoke only once. "Did they confirm the flight crew list?" The agent nodded. "Yes. Lead attendant Kelsey Danner. 10 years in. 3 prior ethics complaints. 2 closed by private settlement. 1 still active." Elias stared through the tinted window. "Start a cross-agency review. FAA. Dot. Civil aviation compliance. I want full loop-in by morning." The car merged onto the interstate. Back in the FAA command hub in D.C., a notification blinked. SkyShield Protocol, Phase 2 engaged subject. Aurelia Air Status, Live Tracking Enabled Actions, 12. Airports on Monitor flagged, 3. Additional carriers for association. 3 more. Not just Aurelia. Elias had designed SkyShield not as a net, but as a web. If one airline failed, it automatically mapped the connected ones' code-shared flights, joint crew training programs, shared airport gates. That's how it could bring down clusters of abuse, not just isolated bad actors. Within the next 30 minutes, JFK received an alert to review incoming Flight 1483, another Aurelia route. Denver flagged a pending runway clearance request and placed it on pause. Dallas-Fort Worth received a Level 2 behavior review notification, auto-sent from SkyShield. None of these systems had buzzers or alarms. They just delayed access, quietly, legally, inside the sedan. Elias received a ping on his phone. Aurelia airstock price, 2.7%, and dropping. He sipped from a metal thermos and said nothing. The agent beside him glanced at her screen again. "Dr. Monroe, SkyShield analysts want to know should we initiate the Passenger Ethics Index rollout." Elias leaned back and closed his eyes. "Not yet. Let the system watch itself first. The public will see soon enough." He tapped his fingers once, then asked, "Has anyone from Aurelia called yet?" Not a word. Elias smiled faintly. "They will." The sedan turned down a quiet street toward the FAA's Seattle regional office. Above them, planes climbed into the evening sky. Some of them were already flying under new rules. The crew just didn't know it yet. Seattle's FAA regional office didn't look like the kind of place where revolutions began. No marble halls, no towering flags, just gray walls, fluorescent lights, and layers of bureaucracy humming quietly in the background. But when Elias Monroe stepped inside at 6:04 p., A current of urgency rippled down the halls, not from his name, from his data. Lauren Shea, Deputy Director of the Passenger Rights Division, was waiting just inside the elevator alcove. "Dr. Monroe," she said, clipboard in hand, eyes already darting over the latest Sky Shield logs. "We flew in 2 ethics leads from D.C. "They saw the clip. Has it spread yet?" Elias asked as the elevator doors opened. 2 TikTok accounts, 1 aviation subreddit, she said. Under 1 million views, but growing fast. "Let it grow," he said flatly. She paused, slightly taken aback. "You're not trying to contain this." "I'm giving the system time," he replied, stepping out. Time to watch itself burn. The FAA's Situation Analysis Room wasn't built for drama, just rows of screens and people who rarely looked up. But tonight, every screen flickered with blinking orange tags: Aurelia Air, Sky Shield Red Alert, Gate Watch Active. One analyst turned. "Flight 611 triggered the full pattern scan," he said. "It's not just this flight." "Sir, it's a cascade." "How many carriers?" Elias asked. 3, potentially 4. Shared staff, shared systems. Lauren leaned over another console. "We have confirmation that Danner Kelsey was involved in at least 5 flagged incidents. Same seating reassignments, same profile." Elias's gaze narrowed. "Pull her crew alignment logs. I want timestamps, gate manifests, override triggers." Another agent tapped a key. Facial recognition matched Whitley, the man who took your seat, to 3 other upgrades on Aurelia flights. No payment records. Always displacing confirmed minority passengers. Elias nodded once. The web was tightening. In Denver. Richard Whitley sipped bourbon on a rooftop lounge, unaware that his name, voice, and travel logs had been flagged for civil rights analysis. He wasn't a passenger anymore. He was evidence. And in Washington, D.C. Sky Shield's core compliance team initiated Protocol 2B institutional bias trendline activation. 12 major airports were now flagged to monitor Aurelia Air flights for unjustified reassignment, upgrade overrides without transaction records, crew members with bias-linked pattern tags. But the real strike hadn't hit yet. Elias turned to Lauren. "Is DOT compliance monitoring active?" She nodded. "We've looped in their AI ethics stream. We're now tracking not just behavior, but corporate intent." Elias smiled for the first time that day. In Washington, red alerts danced across dashboards. This wasn't a scandal. It was a structural shift. Across the country at JFK, Flight 1483 taxied toward Gate 38B. But something odd was happening. The gate didn't open. The jet bridge didn't extend. Instead, 3 agents from FAA Ethics stepped forward. No uniforms, no fanfare, just iPads and quiet presence. Confirmed one asked. Valerie Torres nodded. Kelsey Danner. Flight crew. Again. And the passenger, Barbara Cheney. Black. Engineer. Paid for 4D. Now in 14B. No clear reason given. Inside the aircraft. Barbara sat stiff, confused. She had triple-checked her seat, paid full fare, but at the gate, the attendant handed her a new boarding pass without apology. "Just a shift," the woman had said. "Thanks for your flexibility." Now. Barbara stared at her phone, stunned. A notification popped up. "Would you like to report your boarding experience to Sky Shield?" She tapped, "Yes," and the system began to document everything. 5 minutes later, an FAA agent quietly stepped onto the plane. "Miss Barbara Cheney." Valerie asked gently, "Would you speak with us?" The cabin hushed. A few phones recorded discreetly. No shouting, no scandal, just precision. Barbara stood, head high, and walked off. Back in Seattle, Elias watched the live feed from JFK. Second verified incident in a week. Lauren muttered, "Same crew, same cover-up, same silence." Elias replied, "Until now." He turned to a legal advisor. "Can we activate Directive 4? The man nodded. "You've got the authority. And the data." Elias stood. "Then it's time to take them off autopilot." Within the hour, a confidential FAA directive spread across the country. Effective immediately, any airline engaging in discriminatory seat reassignment or opaque in-flight bias will face operational ethics freeze, loss of boarding priority, suspension from code-sharing privileges at all Sky Shield certified airports. 12 airports complied. Aurelia's stock dropped 5.3% in 90 minutes. 2 other airlines self-reported suspicious boarding anomalies, hoping to avoid audit. And Sky Shield trended globally. Not for revenge. For results? At precisely 10:30 a.m., Sky Shield's system crossed an invisible threshold. What began as a pattern recognition protocol now shifted into active enforcement mode. The 12-airport pilot program had already confirmed its viability. Passenger impact scores, crew reassignment anomalies, AI-confirmed repeat offenders. Now, the code wasn't just flagging behavior, it was grounding planes. In Atlanta, a routine Aurelia Air Flight number 927 began its descent into Hartsfield-Jackson. Blue skies, no turbulence, passengers half asleep in their upright seats. But as the wheels touched down, the captain's cockpit screen pinged. FOA priority flag hold at gate, do not deplane compliance officers inbound. Captain Reyes read the alert twice. "That can't be right," she muttered. Her co-pilot looked confused. "We're clear on logs. What's the issue?" Reyes shook her head. "No idea. Never seen this code before." She didn't know yet. But Sky Shield had caught something before takeoff. A reassignment submitted by her gate crew, moving a confirmed black passenger to the back row to balance passenger weight. No explanation. No justification. But Sky Shield saw the override, logged the pattern, triggered the hold. Minutes later, FAA officials boarded. No sirens, no shouting, just clipboards and tablet scans. And a single line of inquiry: who made the change? The crew looked stunned. One flight attendant opened her mouth, but the lead shook her head. "You'll want to speak to Central Dispatch," which was code for, "We don't want to be caught saying what everyone knows." Back in D.C., the FAA's Ethics Command Center logged the incident. Pattern match high confidence. Aurelia Air Ethics Compliance score below 80. Action suspend preferred routes through Atlanta, Logan, O'Hare, LAX. And then came the blow everyone felt. LaGuardia Airport joined the freeze. That single airport move cut Aurelia's East Coast pipeline by 22%. Flights rerouted. Crew shifts canceled. Revenue hemorrhaging by the minute. At Sky Shield HQ, Lauren stood at Elias's office door, visibly rattled. "You need to see this." Elias looked up from his screen. She turned her tablet toward him. Sky Nova Airlines. 5 flights rerouted mid-air due to ethics score drop. 4 airport gate rejections. 2 carriers now below Sky Shield certification threshold. Elias blinked once. "Passengers all rerouted safely," she said. "No disruptions. But the media's catching wind." He walked to the large central display where Sky Shield's Passenger Ethics Index dashboard pulsed like a heartbeat. Scores updated in real time. Green was safe. Yellow meant borderline. Red meant crisis. Aurelia was deep red. Sky Nova barely yellow. 3 other carriers now hovered in warning zones. Lauren hesitated. Shall we increase the public visibility threshold? Elias turned to her slowly. Make the dashboard live. Are you sure that'll put heat on everyone? Exactly, he said. Now they can't hide. By noon, Twitter exploded. A tweet from a verified journalist read, 4 airlines just got flagged by SkyShield. This isn't policy, it's programming, and the code is watching them. Another user posted, you know what I just saw at O'Hare? A gate agent apologizing for a reassignment and offering compensation. Never seen that before. SkyShield started trending across every platform. And the shift wasn't just digital. At Denver International, a captain made an announcement over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this aircraft is SkyShield compliant. If you experience anything that doesn't feel just, speak to a crew member. We're here to fly fair. The cabin clapped. Quiet, but genuine. Not for PR. For relief. That afternoon in New York, the CEO of Aurelia Air sat in a glass-walled conference room on the 48th floor, screaming into a muted phone. No one told me Monroe had this kind of pull. His COO, pale and quiet, said, we didn't know SkyShield had enforcement capabilities. We thought it was a watchdog. Well, now it's a damn guillotine. They weren't alone in their panic. 3 hedge funds began dumping airline stock tied to low ethics scores. And Era Capital, a powerful institutional investor, released a public statement. Effective immediately, we will no longer support airline groups that fail to meet SkyShield certification standards. Translation billions in future fleet financing gone. Back at SkyShield HQ, Elias stood in the darkened observatory room, watching incoming data trails. Seattle requested access to Phase 2. Baltimore wanted clearance to test crew ethics evaluators at check-in terminals. Elias gave one order. Approve everything, and one more. Push real-time score updates to the public portal. Lauren turned. Passengers will see which airlines are failing live. Good, he said. If they know, they'll choose better. And if the airlines know passengers are watching, maybe they'll finally behave. That night, CNN led with a breaking story. SkyShield grounds 4 airlines. The age of ethical flight has arrived. The ticker at the bottom read, it's not cancel culture. It's consequence culture. And for the first time in aviation history, airports weren't tracking delays, they were tracking dignity. At 7:08 a.m. Eastern Time, the White House phone rang. It wasn't press. It wasn't public relations. It was the president's chief of staff. His voice was sharp, urgent, already brimming with frustration. What the hell is SkyShield, and why are 4 airlines calling my office in a panic across the city? In a quiet SkyShield command room. Elias Monroe was already watching the ripple effects spread through the system. Not just updates, not just dashboards, but real-world consequences, route access, authority escalations, systemic shift. Elias didn't celebrate. He calculated. Lauren entered with a new update. Denver, Midway, and Seattle-Tacoma have joined LaGuardia. That's 5 airports enforcing compliance-based gate access, and another 6 are considering. Elias simply asked, where's Sky Nova? Lauren hesitated. Dropped below 81%. 3 routes canceled mid-air. They've lost $130 million in partnership revenue this week. The pressure was working. But this wasn't about bankrupting airlines. It was about reshaping the rules of flight. Meanwhile, on a morning flight out of Miami. A woman named Tanya scrolled her phone as her plane taxied toward JFK. She wasn't an activist, not a lawyer, just a nurse flying home after a conference. But something made her pause. A memory. A moment. 3 years ago. She was reassigned from first class. No reason. No refund. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She cried in silence. Now. She typed a tweet. They moved me from first class. Said I looked confused. No explanation. Just gone. 10 words. No hashtags. No formatting. Just pain. Within 30 minutes, the tweet passed 20,000 likes, and someone quote tweeted her, "You can check your Sky Shield passenger history now." I did. Mine was flagged. It wasn't in my head. It went viral. In Chicago, a hedge fund manager sent an emergency email to Aurelia's board. Do you expect us to keep investing in an airline that's been ethically blacklisted in Washington? Elias opened a quiet message from the Department of Education. Could Sky Shield be adapted for school equity tracking? He didn't respond immediately. He just saved it under a folder marked Phase 3 Civil Systems Integration. By noon, media outlets scrambled to keep up. ABC led with Airlines face. Ethics reckoning who gets the seat. NBC's panel debated boarding optimization or bias in disguise. CNN featured a former flight attendant under anonymity. It wasn't official policy, she whispered. But if a platinum-tier passenger looked uncomfortable near someone who didn't fit the profile, we were told to fix it. How move the black passenger? Always. Her voice cracked. I hated it, but I needed the job. At FAA headquarters, the administrator walked into a quiet room marked Tier 1 Ethics Oversight. Inside sat Elias. No briefcase, no entourage, just his tablet and the glow of momentum behind him. Mr. Monroe, the administrator said carefully, we'd like you to present your findings to the Congressional Transportation Subcommittee. Elias didn't blink. I'm ready. That afternoon, the Sky Shield dashboard went public. Real-time scores for every certified airline, passenger feedback index, route behavior, crew reassignment audits. For the first time in aviation history, passengers could see the data behind their boarding passes, and what they saw was staggering. Dozens of stories poured in. I've been downgraded from 2A to 13C 4 times this year, always same airline. My husband was moved mid-boarding. We were told his seat had been optimized for crew balance. Turns out someone else just walked on with investor credentials. They always smile when they reassign me, like I should thank them. Row 12 Club started trending. A quiet anthem of those pushed to the back. Sky Shield HQ couldn't keep up with demand. Lauren stared at her feed. Elias, this isn't a policy shift, it's a movement. He nodded. They thought we were coding reports, but we're coding memory. She blinked. What do you mean? We're giving the system something it never had: accountability that doesn't forget. By evening, Sky Nova CEO Donovan Clark sat in a corner suite in Manhattan, glaring at a Sky Shield printout. He turned to his VP of Operations. How the hell did this guy take down our airline without a badge, without a press kit? The VP didn't answer, because there was no answer. Elias hadn't taken down anything. He'd held up a mirror, and the system crumbled under its own reflection. Back in D.C., Elias stood on the rooftop of the Sky Shield building as the sun dipped below the horizon. The city lights blinked awake like data points across a map. He didn't smile, didn't exhale in triumph. He just thought of all the passengers who were quietly told they didn't belong, and how this time, The system replied, "Yes, you do." It wasn't a press conference that changed the industry. It was a spreadsheet. At precisely 9:12 a.m., SkyShield's live dashboard received an internal push. It looked simple airline names, route codes, ethics scores, and a column titled Passenger Dignity Index. But when that dashboard went public, it did what lawsuits and viral videos had failed to do. It gave injustice a timestamp. Each row told a story anonymous, quiet, precise. And by 9:15 a.m., the world was watching. In a cramped newsroom in Washington, investigative reporter Marcus Dill stood up so fast he knocked over his coffee. He scrolled the live sheet. Aurelia Air, Sky Nova, Stratus Jet, all with sub-80 scores, all flagged for repeat offenses. He grabbed his phone. Front page? I'm not asking. I've got receipts, verified patterns, FAA silence, and SkyShield blowing the lid off it all. His editor paused. You're saying the airlines have been optimizing racism? Marcus didn't flinch. No, I'm saying they coded it. The article would go live in 4 hours and break 10 million views before midnight. But SkyShield wasn't waiting. It was already acting. At SkyShield HQ, Elias Monroe leaned back from the control desk. Across the room, data analysts processed user reports 1,000 in a single hour. One showed a screenshot, a black veteran reassigned mid-boarding. Another, a deaf passenger, moved for crew convenience, while her original seat went to a preferred tier investor. Lauren rushed in. Denver just flagged Sky Nova's boarding system. Internal memo used the phrase passenger optics to justify seating. Elias raised an eyebrow. That's the third time we've seen that phrase. Sounds innocent, Lauren said, but hides intent. He finished. They logged it as a behavioral flag category red. Meanwhile, in Houston, a 17-year-old high school senior named Kira opened SkyShield's passenger portal. She'd followed the story, but didn't expect anything personal. Then she found a flight from 6 months ago flagged red. She'd been moved from seat 3A on a debate trip. The system had archived the override code VIP Priority Realignment, the name of the man who took her seat. A tech executive now linked to 2 similar incidents. She sat in silence. Then she typed a post. I thought I was being dramatic. Turns out, I was being profiled. It went viral within 30 minutes. In Seattle, a janitor at a regional airport logged into her employee portal. A quiet update had appeared. Effective immediately, all passenger reassignment must include rationale notes and supervisor co-signature. SkyShield audit tags enabled. She stared at the screen. The system had never cared about her complaints before. Now it not only cared, it kept receipts. At noon, Elias walked through FAA HQ. Security nodded. Staff whispered. He entered a silent boardroom where 4 regional directors waited, papers in hand. Lauren joined him, closing the door. Elias placed a single document on the table. We're recommending a full ethics freeze for Sky Nova, not just public routes, code share partnerships, expansion clearances, everything. The room stiffened. That's never been done, one director muttered. It's never been necessary, Elias said calmly. What will they say? Another asked. They'll say the same thing they always say. Elias replied, that the system was working, until it worked against them. The vote passed unanimously. At 2:45 p.m., FAA issued its first public directive. Any carrier engaged in undocumented seat reassignments or statistically biased upgrades will face restricted gate access. Pending investigation, within minutes, 5 airlines called emergency board meetings. By 3:15, 3 hedge funds pulled investment from Skynova. At 3:30, SkyShield's live portal crashed from user traffic. By 4:15, a new post appeared. Passenger displacement isn't random, it's structured. And now, it's documented. Back at HQ, Elias reviewed a new report. 1340 verified reassignment complaints in the last 6 months. Of those, 89% involved people of color. Of those, 71% lost their seat to white passengers with no documented upgrade. It wasn't accidental. It was normalized. Lauren stared at the screen. They didn't even try to hide it. They didn't have to, Elias said. Until now. She turned. What happens next? He replied. We turn the data into precedent. In the evening quiet of Union Station, Elias sat in a corner cafe booth sipping mint tea. Across from him, a man in a TSA jacket approached quietly. My sister works check-in. Since your system went live, she hasn't had one racial profiling complaint escalated. You fixed the rules. Elias shook his head gently. No. I just made sure the rules couldn't hide anymore. That night, the final tweet of the day said, "You don't need to scream when the system listens. You need to build a mirror so it never forgets." And underneath, someone replied, "SkyShield isn't surveillance. It's a memory that finally tells the truth." Room 2141 of the Rayburn House office building was rarely this quiet. No press gauntlet, no protest signs, just a tense hush, like the air itself was listening. At the center of it sat Elias Monroe. No slides, no entourage, just a navy suit, calm eyes, and a laminated boarding pass. He laid it on the table like evidence in a trial. This was mine. Seat 2A, until it wasn't. The Congressional Subcommittee on Transportation Ethics leaned forward. Congresswoman Maria Reyes, chairing the session, adjusted her mic. This hearing will come to order. Elias didn't open with outrage. He opened with 3 facts. Fact 1. Over 400 passengers have submitted verified complaints to SkyShield in 10 days. 89% involve seat reassignments that disproportionately affected people of color. Fact 2. Of the top 25 crew members cited, 18 were involved in white passengers being promoted without payment, while black passengers were downgraded despite confirmed reservations. Fact 3. 3 airlines maintained internal terminology like comfort optimization and cabin harmony metrics, euphemisms for visual bias hidden in upgrade logic. He looked up. These were not accidents. They were instructions wrapped in politeness. Then he told a story. I boarded Flight 701 at JFK. I was in seat 2A. A white man, no boarding pass. No identification was seated there 5 minutes later. The flight attendant smiled and told me, "It just works out better this way." He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The silence said more than outrage ever could. Congressman Fields, a senior member with silver hair, tapped a pen. I've been flying since the 70s. I've seen overbooking, turbulence, and delays, but I've never seen discrimination logged like this, time-stamped, indexed, coded into process. He paused. You've built a mirror, Dr. Monroe, and what we're seeing in it isn't just turbulence, it's inequity. Then came the challenge. Congressman Wilkes, a skeptical moderate, leaned in. Some say SkyShield is surveillance, facial recognition, pattern tracking. It's invasive. Isn't this just control in a new wrapper? Elias nodded slowly. Surveillance without consent is control, but transparency with accountability is protection. He tapped his pen. Sky Shield doesn't log faces. It logs behavior. Overrides. Repeat patterns. It's not watching passengers. It's watching the systems that decide who counts as human. The room shifted. Not applause, just respect. Congresswoman Reyes asked the next question. Would you consider placing Sky Shield under Department of Transportation oversight? Elias answered without pause. Yes, but only if the data remains public. Only if the passengers can still compare their experience with the system. Reyes nodded. Fair. The hearing continued. Midway. The committee played a testimony from Barbara Cheney, the engineer reassigned from business class without explanation. Her voice was steady, but quiet. I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to be that woman. But after what Sky Shield revealed, I wish I had. She held up her original seat assignment. The room went still. Then came the shock. A former flight attendant, testifying anonymously via voice-only call, admitted we were told to maintain cabin comfort if a platinum-tier passenger didn't want to sit next to someone. Uncomfortable, we'd quietly move the other guest. Did the other guest often look a certain way? Asked the committee chair. A pause. They were almost always black or brown. By session's end, there was no vote, no policy yet. But something seismic had occurred. Not a scandal, a reckoning. The mirror Elias built had become a window into every cabin, every gate, every unspoken bias wrapped in protocol. Outside, a reporter caught up to him. Dr. Monroe, do you think the airlines will change? He looked at the sky. A plane crossed overhead. Only if we show them they can't fly above consequence. That night. Elias sat in a quiet corner of Union Market with Lauren, 2 mugs of tea between them. She pulled out her phone. The hearing's gone viral. Top 5 across all networks. Even Fox covered it. Elias nodded. It's not the clip that matters. It's what follows. Lauren studied him. Are you okay? He took a breath. When I was 15, my father got bumped from a flight. Quietly. Sat at the gate for 6 hours. I asked him why he didn't fight. He said, because fighting doesn't change a thing. He met her eyes. Now it does. It began not with protests, but press releases. At 7:42 a.m., a small airline based in Miami Siabzi Airways became the first to issue a public statement. Effective immediately. Siabzi Airways will partner with Sky Shield and adopt the Passenger Ethics Index across all domestic flights. It was a calculated move. They hadn't been mentioned in any hearings. No viral clips. No investigative reports. But they understood something most airlines hadn't yet accepted. Sky Shield wasn't just policy. It was inevitable. By noon, 3 more airlines followed. Not out of courage, but out of fear. Because every executive now realized something chilling Sky Shield wasn't just monitoring injustice. It was rewriting airline infrastructure. At 2:14 p.m. MIM, Denver International Airport issued a statement. As part of our ethical modernization initiative, DIA will now prioritize gate access based on Sky Shield compliance scores. Translation. If your airline failed to treat passengers with dignity, you'd lose your gate. That hit harder than any fine. Denver is a national connector. Lose Denver, and half the West Coast traffic reroutes. By 4:00 p.m., Atlanta, Chicago Midway, and Seattle-Tacoma followed suit. But the final blow came at 5:45 p. M. LaGuardia signed on. Inside Sky Shield HQ. Elias Monroe stood before a projection screen filled with blinking maps. Each red dot was a flagged gate. Each green one, certified. More were turning green by the hour, but the red still pulsed. Lauren stepped in with a tablet. You want the short version or the long? Elias didn't flinch. Short. Sky Nova just had 5 flights rerouted mid-air because their ethics score dropped below the FAA's compliance threshold. He raised an eyebrow. Passengers know not yet. But gate agents do. Elias turned to the window. It's happening. That night, CNN Breaking News ran a blunt chyron for airlines hit with Sky Shield penalties as airports shift standards. The anchor said it plainly. This isn't PR. It's operational suffocation. Airlines are losing real-time money, and they're not ready. Online, the narrative was clearer. A tweet with 100,000 plus likes read, "They really built a credit score for how airlines treat people." Another added Sky Shield isn't cancel culture. It's consequence culture. By Friday morning, hedge funds started dumping stock in airlines with failing ethics scores. Then came the big one. Era Capital, a major institutional investor, made its move. Our portfolio will no longer support airline groups that fail to meet Sky Shield benchmarks. Translation billions in aircraft leasing. Gone overnight. Back at HQ. Elias didn't celebrate. He met with behavioral scientists and engineers. Seattle wants access to Phase 2 protocol. Lauren said, approve it. Baltimore wants to run pilot tests using the crew ethics evaluator. He nodded. Quietly. No headlines. Let the data speak. Lauren hesitated. What about the transparency portal update? That'll expose everyone in real time. He met her gaze. Good. Meanwhile, in a Manhattan office tower, the CEO of Sky Nova Airlines slammed a walnut desk. This man, this nobody is holding the entire industry hostage. His legal team stayed silent because they knew Elias Monroe wasn't a nobody. He was the architect of the system now dictating their profits. That evening, Elias walked alone through Union Station. No motorcade, no press. He passed a young woman showing her mother something on her phone. Look, the girl said. This flight's green. The airline passed Sky Shield. The mother nodded. Then we book it. Elias kept walking, but he smiled. At midnight, Sky Shield issued a silent update to 17 partner airports' ethics score threshold raised to 92%. Enforcement begins 0600. No press release, no headline, just code. The kind that made CEOs lose sleep and passengers sleep better. At 6:03 a.m., the phone call came, not from legal, not from PR, from Donovan Clark, CEO of Sky Nova Airlines. Get me Elias Monroe. I don't care if he's on the moon. Get him. At that exact moment, Elias was finishing his morning run. His phone buzzed. He answered without stopping. Monroe? The voice on the other end cracked with desperation. This is Clark. We need to talk. Elias stopped, sat on a bench. I'm listening. We've lost $130 million in routes this week. Our board wants to know how to stabilize. What do you need? There it was. Not an apology. A negotiation. Elias answered. You want Sky Shield to restore your access. Clark jumped in. Exactly. We'll sign the charter. Issue the release. Just tell me what you need. Elias exhaled. What I need isn't PR. It's principle. At 9:00 a.m. Sharp. Inside a secure federal conference room at Sky Shield HQ, Donovan Clark, CEO of Sky Nova Airlines, sat across from Elias Monroe. No lawyers, no assistants, just two men, one trying to salvage a crumbling empire, the other steady as gravity. Clark's fingers tapped against the aluminum water bottle in front of him. He broke first. "I built this airline." Elias nodded. "I saw. We carried 86 million passengers last year. And now, because of you, we can't land in Chicago without begging for clearance." Elias didn't flinch. "You didn't lose access because of me. Mr. Clark, you lost it because of your choices." Clark leaned forward, tired, defensive. "Look, you and I both know this system of yours. It's genius. Brutal, but genius. You built a moral firewall." He let out a dry chuckle, more smoke than laugh. "But if we burn, we take a piece of the sky with us." You really want that Elias finally spoke, slow and razor clean. "I don't want anyone to burn. I want them to build differently." He pulled a folder from his briefcase. Inside, 3 documents. Document 1, a 14-page report of discriminatory seating patterns on Sky Nova flights data, timestamps, names, and percentages. Document 2, a drafted public apology admitting systemic bias and acknowledging passenger mistreatment under the euphemism of upgrade optimization. Document 3, a binding agreement to place all Sky Nova crew through Sky Shield's Ethics Evaluation Index for 24 months, unfiltered audits, real-time monitoring, full transparency. Clark's eyes narrowed. "You want me to sign a confession? I want you to sign a correction." The silence in the room was thick, like something ancient was being reset. Clark reached for the pen, paused, then signed. Not with a flourish, with resignation. The room didn't erupt. There was no fanfare. But something shifted, not in power, in balance. At 11:42 a.m., Sky Shield system updated Sky Nova's compliance status, provisionally certified. At 11:43 a.m., O'Hare reopened gate access to Sky Nova. At 11:45, Lauren texted Elias. He signed, Elias replied, and now we watch. What Clark didn't know, what most CEOs still hadn't realized, was that the signature did more than restore his roots. It triggered a cascade. Sky Shield had been quietly working with 4 federal departments to integrate the ethics clause into federal vendor contracts for transportation grants. With Clark's signature, that clause became precedent. From that moment on, every airline receiving federal funding would be held to the Sky Shield standard. The handshake wasn't just a business move, it was legislative leverage, and the industry had just crossed a line. Across the country, other executives panicked. One texted a peer, "Did you hear Clark caved?" Another replied, "Not caved. Got cornered." A third message. That man didn't bring a press kit. He brought a new rule book, back at HQ. Elias walked the Sky Shield floor. He stopped at Lauren's desk. "Update the charter," he said. She blinked. To say what? He looked out at the gray skyline. Ethics compliance is no longer optional. It's operational. She smiled. That's the opening line, then. By 4:00 p.m., CNN's homepage read, Sky Nova signs groundbreaking ethics accord with Sky Shield. NBC power shifts. CEO bows to passenger justice system. Community posts exploded. One call, one signature. The whole sky just changed. This isn't revenge. It's repair. You don't belong in first class, they said. He showed them he owns the runway. In a quiet home in Tulsa, Judith, A retired teacher scrolled through the Sky Nova apology. She wiped tears from her eyes. She remembered a flight 3 years ago. She'd been bumped to row 14. No explanation. That day, she cried in the restroom. Today, she whispered, "Thank you for not letting them pretend it never happened." Back in D.C., Elias stood by the window in his 57th floor office. The city pulsed below, full of motion, noise, routine. But here, it was still. The flat screen behind him lit up FAA certifies Sky Shield as baseline protocol for all commercial carriers. Elias didn't pump his fist, didn't toast. He simply poured himself black coffee, walked out onto the balcony, and watched the airspace he had redefined. He didn't want legacy. He wanted standards that no longer depended on whether someone fought for them. And now they didn't. It began with a hashtag, not a campaign, not a press release, just 10 quiet words typed from a kitchen in Charlotte, North Carolina. They moved me from first class, said I looked confused. No tags, no mention of Sky Shield, no anger. But within 20 minutes, the tweet had 8,000 likes. 30 minutes later, someone quote-tweeted it with a screenshot of Sky Shield's new passenger report tool. You can check if your flight was flagged. I did. That was the spark. By lunchtime, the Sky Shield site crashed twice from traffic overload. People from Atlanta, Detroit, Oakland, Newark City. After City began uploading photos of old boarding passes. Some circled their original seat numbers in red. Others shared app screenshots. Confirmed seats mysteriously downgraded before boarding. One post read, "Funny how I always got bumped to row 11 after checking into 2A. Thought it was just bad luck. Turns out it had a name Kelsey." Another, "I'm a doctor. I booked first for a reason." The attendant smiled when she told me I'd been moved. Smiled like she knew I wouldn't fight back. The replies. Same here. Same airline. Same damn flight attendant. Same gate. The thread exploded. People weren't just posting stories. They were connecting patterns. A user tagged the movement, Row 12 Club. It stuck. In a cramped D.C. newsroom, investigative journalist Marcus Dill watched the chaos bloom across 3 monitors. He'd been tracking Sky Shield since its quiet activation. But now it was a movement. He called his editor. "I need the front page Sunday. We don't run airline fluff. This isn't fluff. It's data-backed discrimination with receipts. A beat. You've got 2,000 words. Make it sting." At Sky Shield HQ, Lauren Shee burst into Elias's office without knocking. "They're coming forward." She held out a tablet. Elias scanned the names: veterans, nurses, federal judges, a retired congresswoman. All of them had been quietly reassigned, silently sidelined. All of them were now speaking. "Do we publish the database early?" she asked. Elias didn't look up. "Let them speak first. Their voices are more powerful than ours by nightfall." National media finally caught up. ABC led with airline algorithms or racial redlining. NBC followed the quiet cost of preferred boarding. CNN ran exclusive interviews with whistleblowers. One former flight attendant admitted it wasn't official policy. But we all knew if a platinum-tier passenger looked uncomfortable near someone, we fixed it discreetly. Another confessed, "I got written up for not following the optics memo." The anchor paused before finishing. Aurelia Air declined to comment, but the damage was already done. In Charlotte, the woman who'd sent the first tweet, Tanya, received a message from a 17-year-old girl I showed your tweet to my mom. She cried. Said it happened to her too. On the way to her dad's funeral. She never talked about it. Tanya didn't reply right away. She stared at the screen and whispered. They really thought we'd stay quiet forever. In New York, Sky Shield hosted a listening session. 60 passengers. Not influencers. Not activists. Just people. People who had lived the silence. At the front, one slide. Tell us what happened and how it made you feel. A retired Navy officer stood first. I felt like a ghost. A teacher from Kansas City followed. I blamed myself. A grandmother from Oakland. I didn't want to be that person. So I said nothing. Tears filled the room, not of anger, but of recognition. The next morning, Elias received a phone call, not from a reporter, not from the FAA, from Richard Lane, chair of the Transportation Oversight Committee. Dr. Monroe, we're convening a hearing. I see. We'd like you to testify. Not about Sky Shield's tech, about its necessity. Elias took a slow breath. I'll be there. That night. He stood on his balcony, watching DC flicker beneath him. Lauren joined him, holding 2 mugs. They're calling it a reckoning, she said softly. Elias didn't answer right away. A plane arced across the sky above them. He finally spoke. They'll try to spin it. Say it's reverse discrimination. Overreach. Lauren turned to him. And what will you call it? He looked her in the eye. Balance. Across the country in Oakland, a woman named Ria showed her 8-year-old grandson a headline on her phone. That's me, she said, pointing. Passengers' quiet protest triggers national airline audit. You, the boy asked, eyes wide. Yep. They didn't want me in that seat, but I sat down anyway. He looked at her, not like she was old, but like she was brave. And maybe that was the point. The quiet had ended, and dignity finally had a dashboard. The hallway outside room 2141 of the Rayburn House office building was unusually quiet for a Wednesday morning. No protest signs, no press clamor, just stillness. Inside, under rows of soft recessed lighting, the Congressional Subcommittee on Transportation Ethics prepared for testimony. 3 rows of chairs lined one side. C-SPAN cameras stood like silent sentinels. At the center table sat one man, no entourage, no legal team, no charts. Dr. Elias Monroe. A manila folder tucked neatly under his arm. He didn't posture. He didn't adjust his tie. He just waited. The room was packed with lawmakers, 7 representatives in all. 5 men, 2 women, most in gray suits, all watching him. Congresswoman Maria Reyes, chair of the subcommittee, tapped her mic. This hearing will come to order. Our topic today, passenger discrimination in commercial aviation and the role of independent audit systems in identifying unethical conduct. She nodded toward Elias. Dr. Monroe, we thank you for your time. You may begin your statement. Elias stood, but didn't open the folder. I won't use prepared remarks, he said. Instead, I'd like to offer 3 facts, 1 story, and 1 question. The room leaned in. Fact 1. Over 400 passengers have submitted verified reports to Sky Shield in the last 10 days. 89% involved seat reassignments disproportionately affecting passengers of color, most of them black. He paused. Fact 2. Of the top 25 flight attendants cited most frequently in these cases, 18 were involved in multiple incidents where white passengers were promoted to first class without upgrades, while black passengers with confirmed seats were removed, A few murmurs from the gallery. Fact 3. At least 3 airlines maintained internal language referencing comfort optimization, a coded justification used to reassign seats based on appearance or perceived social value. He held up a laminated boarding pass. Now, the story. This was mine. Flight 701, JFK to San Francisco. I was seated in 2A until I wasn't. A white man with no boarding pass, no ID, was escorted to my seat. I was told there had been a mix-up. He glanced at the room. When I asked why, the attendant smiled and said, "It just works out better this way." No anger in his tone, just precision. She didn't shout. She didn't curse. She just assumed no one would question it, least of all me. He placed the pass on the table. That assumption is what Sky Shield was designed to measure. Representative Wilkes, a moderate with gray temples, leaned forward. "Dr. Monroe, your system. Some critics say it's invasive. Facial recognition, behavioral flags. Isn't that just surveillance by another name?" Elias responded calmly. "Surveillance without consent is control, but transparency with accountability. That's safety." He continued. "Sky Shield doesn't store faces. It logs patterns, overrides, repeat behaviors. It's not watching people. It's watching the systems that decide who gets treated as fully human." Another silence, this one heavier. Congresswoman Reyes spoke again. "There are calls to expand Sky Shield using federal funds. Are you willing to place the system under Department of Transportation oversight?" Elias met her eyes. "I am if the data stays public. If passengers can still verify their stories against the system. If we don't bury the truth in red tape." A pause. Then Reyes nodded. "Fair." Midway through the hearing, the committee streamed passenger testimony. Barbara Cheney appeared via secure video link. She described being reassigned from business class. "I didn't fight it," she said softly. "I didn't want to be that woman causing a scene. But after what Sky Shield showed me, I wish I had." Her screen cut off, but the words hung. Then came the final portion open committee discussion. Representative Fields, senior, seasoned, leaned into his mic. "I've been flying for 40 years back when you could smoke on board and the bins were barely big enough for a coat." He paused, looking at Elias. "I've seen delays, turbulence, overbooking, but I've never seen anything expose the industry like what you've built. A beat. You've turned a mirror on all of us, and the reflection's not pretty." He tapped a pen against the table. "Maybe it's time we stopped calling it turbulence and started calling it what it is: inequity." There was no applause, no cameras flashing, but the moment was seismic. Sky Shield wasn't a startup anymore. It was national infrastructure. Outside, a reporter tried to catch Elias as he exited the hearing. "Dr. Monroe, do you believe airlines will actually change?" He paused beneath the tall columns of the building. He looked upward as a plane passed overhead, its engines a distant hum, then answered quietly, "Only if we keep showing them they can't fly above consequence." And with that, he walked down the marble steps into a different kind of spotlight, the one that shines not from fame, but from accountability. 3 days after the hearing, the first tremor hit. Siabzi Airways, a small regional carrier based out of Miami, issued a press release at 7:42 a.m., effective immediately. Siabzi Airways will adopt Sky Shield's Passenger Ethics Index across all domestic flights. No one expected them to be first. They weren't even mentioned in the hearings. But they understood one thing. This was no longer optional. By noon, 3 more airlines followed suit, some out of integrity, most out of fear. Executives were panicking not publicly, but in private Slack channels and war room meetings, because they finally grasped what the public didn't yet fully understand. SkyShield wasn't a watchdog. It was infrastructure. It wasn't just logging complaints. It was embedded in gate assignments, in crew scheduling, in upgrade approvals, and most dangerously, for the airlines in airport access. At 2:14 p.m., the tremor turned into a shockwave. Denver International Airport released a joint memo with the FAA. As part of our ethical modernization initiative, DIA will prioritize gate access based on SkyShield compliance scores. Carriers with substandard records may face delayed access or redirection. Translation: lose SkyShield, and you lose Denver. And with Denver goes half the West Coast traffic flow. By 4 p.m., Atlanta, Chicago Midway, and Seattle-Tacoma joined in. And then came the one that made headlines scream LaGuardia. In a modest 12th floor federal office, Elias stood by the window watching the dashboard light up. Red flags turned green as hesitant airports checked certified. Carrier names blinked from yellow to red to gray, then red again as updates pushed through. Behind him, Lauren entered with her tablet. "Do you want the short version or the long one?" she asked. "Short," Elias replied. SkyNova just had 5 flights rerouted mid-air because their ethics score dropped below threshold. Passengers know not yet, but gate agents do. Elias didn't gloat. He just turned to the window. It's happening. That evening, CNN aired a breaking news segment. 4 airlines hit with SkyShield penalties as airports shift compliance standards. In the studio, airline analysts debated furiously. One analyst said bluntly, "This isn't PR, it's operational control. Airlines are bleeding cash in real time." Another added, "If you're not SkyShield certified, you can't guarantee a gate. This is like the TSA, but for morality." On social media, the tone was sharper. This is wild. They built a credit score for how airlines treat people. Another tweet with 100,000+ likes simply read, "SkyShield isn't cancel culture. It's consequence culture." And the passengers. They watched everything. Every reroute, every apology, every rerun of that hearing. Because for the first time in airline history, the system wasn't just tracking delays, it was tracking dignity. By Friday morning, 2 hedge funds quietly dumped stock in carriers with low SkyShield scores. Then the real rupture came. Era Capital, a major institutional investor, issued a statement. "Our portfolio will no longer support airline groups failing to meet passenger ethics benchmarks as defined by SkyShield's framework." Translation: billions in future fleet financing gone. Elias didn't celebrate. He didn't even smile. He just sat with his analysts and data engineers, reviewing real-time impact graphs and fine-tuning compliance triggers. Lauren popped her head in. "Seattle wants access to Phase 2 protocols. Approve. Baltimore wants to test the new crew ethics evaluator. Do it quietly. Should we push the update to the transparency portal?" She hesitated. "That'll put heat on a lot of people." Elias looked at her. "Good." Later that day, in a Manhattan high-rise office, the CEO of SkyNova Airlines slammed his fist onto a walnut conference table. "This man, this nobody is holding our entire industry hostage." His legal team didn't reply, because they knew. Elias Monroe wasn't a nobody. He was the architect of the system their entire profit model now depended on. Back in D.C., Elias walked through Union Station, unnoticed among travelers. He didn't need a motorcade. He needed endurance. He passed a teenage girl showing her mom something on her phone. Look, this flight's green. That means the airline passed Sky Shield. Her mom nodded. Then we book it. Elias kept walking, but this time, he smiled. At midnight. Sky Shield pushed a silent update to 17 partner airports. Ethics score threshold raised to 92%. Enforcement begins at 0600. No headline, no press, just quiet policy. The kind that makes CEOs lose sleep and passengers sleep better. At 6:03 a.m., Elias's private line buzzed. Donovan Clark, CEO of Sky Nova Airlines, was on the other end. We're hemorrhaging routes. Airports are shutting us out. Our ethics score dropped below 81% overnight. We lost $130 million in partnerships this week. What do you want? Elias asked flatly. What do you need? Clark begged. Elias didn't answer right away. Then you want Sky Shield to restore your access? Yes. We'll adopt the charter. Issue the press release. Just tell me what you need. Elias exhaled. What I need is not PR. It's principle. At 9 a.m., the two men sat across from each other in a federal conference room. No lawyers, no assistants, just Elias, Clark, and silence thick as marble. Clark spoke first. I built this airline. I saw. Elias replied. 86 million passengers last year. Impressive. And now I can't land in Chicago without begging. Elias folded his hands. You didn't lose access because of me. You lost it because of your choices. Clark leaned in. You built a moral firewall. Genius. Brutal, but genius. But if we burn, we take a chunk of the sky with us. You really want that? Elias opened a folder. Inside were 3 documents. 1. A 14-page data report on discriminatory patterns. 2. A drafted apology and formal admission of systemic bias. 3. A binding agreement for 24 months of crew ethics training. Clark stared. You want me to sign a confession? Elias said, I want you to sign a correction. Clark hesitated, then signed. At 11:42 a.m., Sky Shield's dashboard updated Sky Nova, provisionally certified. At 11:43, O'Hare reopened gate access. At 11:45, Lauren texted Elias. He signed? Elias replied. And now we watch. What Donovan Clark didn't realize as he slid his trembling signature across the final document was this: he hadn't just saved his airline, he'd activated a federal chain reaction. Sky Shield had been quietly working behind the scenes for months, embedding an ethics clause into the vendor contracts of all federally supported transportation grants. Until now, it had been optional. But Sky Nova's signature. That made it precedent, which meant that every airline, every carrier, every regional fleet receiving federal aid was now by law required to comply with Sky Shield's ethical standards. Overnight, an industry became accountable. In executive suites across the country, the fallout was immediate. One CEO texted a competitor. Did you hear Clark caved? Another replied, not caved. Cornered. A third, that man didn't bring a press kit. He brought a new rule book. Back in Datrusik. Elias stepped quietly onto the Sky Shield floor. Monitors flickered. Dashboards updated in real time. He stopped at Lauren's desk. Update the charter, he said. She looked up. To say what, Elias glanced out the window at the skyline. Start with this. Ethics compliance is no longer optional. It's operational. By evening, news outlets caught wind of the Sky Nova agreement. CNN's headline, Sky Nova signs. groundbreaking ethics accord with Sky Shield NBC, ran power shifts, CEO bows, to passenger justice system Telltale's community board, exploded one call. One signature. The whole sky just changed. Another post. Shared over 70,000 times. This isn't revenge. It's repair. And beneath that, someone wrote, "You don't belong in first class." He showed them he owns the runway. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, Judith, a retired schoolteacher, sat in her modest living room reading the full Sky Nova apology letter. It brought her to tears. 3 years ago, she had been downgraded from row 2 to the back of the plane without a word. That day, she'd cried in the airport restroom. "Now," she whispered, "thank you for not letting them pretend it never happened." At Sky Shield HQ, Lauren handed Elias another report. Public sentiment spike. 78% of passengers now check airline ethics ratings before booking. "Let's push the transparency portal update," Elias said, "even if it exposes more airlines, especially if it does." Later that night, Elias sat with his mint tea in a quiet corner of the building. A soft buzz came from his encrypted tablet. Notification: FAA Ethics Council upload complete. The protocol wasn't just active anymore. It was standard. Elsewhere, in a 48th floor office in Manhattan, Sky Nova's boardroom was in chaos. Why didn't anyone tell us Monroe had this kind of leverage? The VP of Operations paled. "We didn't think Sky Shield had enforcement power. You thought it was just reporting software. We thought it was optics. Well, now it's a guillotine." That night, their board entered an emergency session. 3 hedge funds threatened to pull out. A 4th demanded full leadership restructuring. One investor asked bluntly, "How do we trust leadership that got outplayed by a black man with a laptop and a protocol?" No one had an answer. Back in D1, Elias reviewed a flurry of overnight data from partner airports. Passenger trust rating 92%. Public reporting engagement +328%. Ethics escalation requests. Tripled Sky Shield wasn't trending. It was transforming. Then came a call from an unlikely place. The Department of Education. They wanted to know, could Sky Shield's framework be adapted? For public school equity tracking. Elias didn't blink. "We'll send a draft." Meanwhile, something beautiful began to unfold. Passengers weren't just telling stories of mistreatment anymore. They were telling stories of protection. One woman posted a video just boarded at Phoenix. The gate agent paused, double-checked something on their screen, then smiled and waved me through. No delay, no weird tone, just welcome. Sky Shield. Thank you. That video hit 2.4 million views in 48 hours. On Good Morning America, a former flight attendant explained, "It's not about fear, it's about fairness. Honestly, it's overdue." Even the hosts nodded. They all had stories. Other industries watched, stunned. A logistics startup in Seattle launched Truck Ethic. A hotel chain requested Sky Shield's equity module. A rideshare app emailed Elias's office asking for a pilot program. And a school superintendent in Ohio simply wrote, "If you can track fairness at 30,000 feet." "Can we do it in classrooms?" Elias wrote back. "Let's talk." At the same time, a hashtag emerged on Twitter and TikTok, Sky Shield Standard. It wasn't about compliance anymore. It was about expectation, about dignity with a digital receipt. In a quiet cafe near DuPont Circle, a group of strangers met for the first time. Barbara Cheney was there. So was a retired Army sergeant. An entrepreneur who'd been strip-searched over a random flag. They didn't vent. They just nodded at each other. "I haven't had to explain my ticket to anyone in 4 weeks," said one woman. "Gate agents look nervous now when they override." Another added, "It's like, dignity has data now." Someone whispered. By week's end, PBS NewsHour ran a rare editorial. The host stared into the camera. The system didn't change because people screamed. It changed because one man built a mirror. And quietly, we saw ourselves. Behind him, a clip played. Elias, silent at a congressional table, watching the room listen. Not everyone cheered. Some executives grumbled. One awkward moment, and now we're blacklisted, but a reply went viral. Not one awkward moment. Repeated patterns. Documented behavior. Welcome to accountability. On a Southwest flight, a pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this aircraft is Sky Shield compliant. If you see something that feels unjust, say it. We're here to fly with fairness." Applause broke out. It wasn't theater. It was relief. In a glass-walled executive suite 30 floors above Midtown Manhattan, Donovan Clark, CEO of Sky Nova Airlines, stared at his phone with the intensity of a man watching his empire unravel 1 pixel at a time. His compliance dashboard, once green, now blinked a throbbing red. 12 of his top routes were at risk. 5 major airports had already limited his fleet's gate access. And the ethics compliance score, a metric he'd laughed off as a political stunt 2 weeks ago, was now the single number tanking his stock value. He slammed a fist onto the walnut desk. "Get me Elias Monroe." "Now." His assistant stammered. "Sir, I believe he's on the East Coast running protocols. I don't care if he's in orbit. Get him on." At that exact moment, Elias was finishing his morning run along the Potomac Trail. Light mist clung to the riverbanks, and the city skyline shimmered in gentle blue. His phone buzzed once. Private number. He didn't flinch, just answered. "Monroe, this is Clark. Donovan Clark." Silence. Then, "I'm listening." What followed wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender. "We're hemorrhaging routes. Airports are shutting us out. Our ethics score dropped below 81% overnight." Elias let the desperation simmer. "We lost $130 million in partnerships this week. Our board wants to know how to stabilize. What do you need from me?" And there it was. Not remorse. Not reflection. Just the transactional reflex of power trying to survive its own collapse. Elias exhaled. "You want Sky Shield to restore your access?" "Exactly. We'll adopt the charter. Issue the press release." "Just tell me what it'll take. Meet me in D.C. today. No entourage. Just you. Fine. One more thing. Yes. Bring a pen." At 9:01 shows, Donovan Clark sat across from Elias Monroe in a secure conference room on the Federal Sky Shield floor. No lawyers, no PR, just wood-paneled silence and a stack of papers between them. Clark was red-eyed, suit wrinkled, his voice tight. "I built this airline from a regional connector with 6 aircraft." "I know," Elias said calmly. "We carried 86 million passengers last year. I saw. And now, because of 1 compliance score. I can't land in Chicago without begging for clearance." Elias folded his hands. "You didn't lose access because of me. Mr. Clark, you lost it because of your choices." Clark leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "You and I both know Sky Shield is genius. Brutal, but genius. You built a moral firewall. He gave a dry chuckle. But if we burn, we take a piece of the sky with us. You really want that Elias didn't blink? I don't want anyone to burn. I want them to build differently. He pushed the documents across the table. Inside were 3 items. 1. A 14-page audit showing a pattern of discriminatory treatment across Sky Nova's flight network. 2. A drafted apology, not just PR gloss, but a formal admission of systemic bias. 3. A binding agreement to place all Sky Nova flight crews through Sky Shield training and real-time evaluation protocols for 24 consecutive months. Clark stared at the stack like it was radioactive. You want me to sign a confession? Elias's response was quiet. I want you to sign a correction. The moment stretched, unspoken tension pressing into every breath. Then Clark reached for the pen. He paused and signed. At 11:42 a.m., Sky Shield's live dashboard updated. Sky Nova Provisional Ethics Certification restored. At 11:43, O'Hare reopened access to Sky Nova gates. At 11:45, Elias received a text from Lauren. He signed. His reply, "Now we watch." What Donovan Clark didn't yet realize was that his signature also activated a long-dormant clause across 4 federal agencies. Sky Shield had quietly lobbied for it for over a year. Any airline signing a Sky Shield ethics agreement retroactively binds all peer carriers under federal funding to the same standard. By nightfall, 3 other airlines began emergency meetings, not to apologize, but to survive. Because Sky Shield wasn't just a watchdog, it had become a system-wide circuit breaker. That afternoon, Elias walked through the Sky Shield floor like he always did, no entourage, no fanfare. Lauren caught up to him, tablet in hand. Seattle's requesting Phase 2 implementation. Baltimore wants to test the real-time crew ethics evaluator, approve both, and the public wants transparency. Push the update. She hesitated. You sure it'll put a lot of heat on the airlines? He turned to her. Good. Later that day. CNN broke the story. Sky Nova CEO signs Federal Ethics Accord with Sky Shield industry shifts overnight. NBC followed power shifts. Sky Shield forces accountability into the skies. Social media was ablaze. He didn't raise his voice. He raised a new standard. Another tweet went viral. This isn't cancel culture. This is consequence culture. Back in Tulsa, Judith reopened her flight app. She typed in her upcoming trip to San Diego. Sky Nova, first class. The Sky Shield score blinked green. She didn't cry this time. She smiled. Let's see them try to move me now. 3 hours after Sky Nova's compliance reinstatement, the effects began rattling across the country, not through speeches or lawsuits, but through systems reacting in real time. At Denver International, the air traffic control tower issued a joint notice. Effective immediately, gate priority will reflect Sky Shield Ethics Index scores. Non-compliant carriers may experience delays. Within the hour, Atlanta, Seattle-Tacoma, and Midway in Chicago followed suit. But the quake, everyone felt LaGuardia. The moment New York's notoriously congested terminal adopted the ethics priority routing, every carrier panicked, because if you lost LaGuardia, you didn't just lose revenue, you lost status. In a gray federal building in D.C., Lauren Shea walked into Elias's office holding 2 tablets. Short version or long version, she asked. Elias sipped his tea. Short. Sky Nova had 5 flights rerouted mid-air today because their ethics rating dropped below threshold again. Do the passengers know? Not yet. But gate agents do. He stood, walked to the window. Outside, planes crawled along runways like ants, precise, invisible, regulated. It's happening, he said. CNN's evening banner read, 4 airlines. Hit with Sky Shield penalties as airports shift compliance standards. In-studio analysts didn't mince words. This isn't PR anymore. This is infrastructure warfare. Sky Shield compliance now controls gate access, code sharing, and runway priority. A retired airline CEO put it bluntly. This is the TSA, but for morality, online. The public moved faster than news anchors. A tweet exploded across platforms. Sky Shield built a credit score for airline decency. I feel safer already. Another post gathered 150K likes in under an hour. This isn't cancel culture. It's consequence architecture. People didn't need graphs. They needed receipts. And now Sky Shield delivered both. In boardrooms from Dallas to Boston, CEOs were scrambling. Ara Capital, one of the largest institutional investors in the aviation space, sent shockwaves through the industry with a blunt public statement. Effective immediately, we will divest from airline groups who fail to meet the Sky Shield Passenger Ethics Index. Translation: billions in future fleet funding gone. Just like that. Back in D.C. Elias sat calmly at the analytics command desk, surrounded by engineers and behavior scientists. Lauren approached, pointing to a live update from Baltimore. They want Phase 2, real-time crew bias tracking. Approved, Elias said. Seattle wants pilot access to the new gate behavior dashboards. Do it quietly. And the public wants transparency. Do we flip the switch? Elias met her gaze. Push the update. Real-time ratings go live. Lauren hesitated. It's going to shake the system. That's the point. At the same moment, in a Sky Nova executive suite, the CEO watched the public dashboard light up like a countdown clock. Every unethical reassignment, every disparity in service, every crew member flag was now visible to the public. For the first time in aviation history, passenger dignity had a digital receipt. Later that night, a captain on a Southwest flight made an unscripted announcement before takeoff. Ladies and gentlemen, this aircraft is Sky Shield compliant. If you experience anything that doesn't feel right, say it. We're flying with fairness. The cabin erupted in applause, not for show, for relief. In Harlem, a public school played clips of Elias's congressional testimony. A teen in the front row raised his hand. Wait, he didn't sue. He didn't protest. The teacher smiled. Nope. He built a system. The class was quiet. Then the kid said, "That's cold-blooded power." Laughter. Then respect. Across the country, other industries took notice. A rideshare platform reached out to Sky Shield about bias flagging drivers. A logistics company asked about adapting passenger equity metrics for delivery routing. A public hospital in New Orleans asked if you can track fairness at 30,000 feet. Can we do the same in our ER? Elias's answer. Let's talk. Back at Sky Shield HQ, a whiteboard filled up fast. Logos, requests, new partnerships. Lauren turned to Elias. We built this for airlines. Now they all want in. Elias's response was simple. It was never just about airlines. In a quiet D.C. cafe, 3 former passengers sat over coffee. Barbara Cheney, a retired Army sergeant, a tech entrepreneur. They compared notes. No yelling. No legal battles. Just restored dignity. I haven't had to explain my ticket in weeks. Gate agents actually check their systems now before reassigning. It's like respect is finally built in. That weekend, PBS NewsHour ran a rare editorial. The host said quietly, "Airlines didn't change because someone screamed. They changed because someone built a mirror. And in that reflection, we saw a better way to fly." At 6:03 a.m., Elias Monroe received a call not from the FAA, not from a journalist, from Geneva. It was the head of the International Civil Aviation Authority. "We've reviewed the Sky Shield Charter. The board wants to talk global adoption." Elias didn't react outwardly, but inside, something pivoted. Sky Shield had started as a firewall. Now, it was becoming a global standard. By noon, 3 international airports, Heathrow's Frankfurt and Singapore Changi, requested onboarding documentation. None of them made public announcements, but their back-end systems began importing the Sky Shield Passenger Ethics API. Why? Because governments were watching, and passengers were demanding accountability across borders. In Madrid, a flight crew reviewed their passenger manifest. Next to every seat number, a new tag blinked "Ethics Compliance Required." At first, no one knew what it meant, until a flight attendant tried to downgrade a Southeast Asian engineer from 1A to 9B. A soft chime interrupted her screen. "Non-compliant action detected. Justification required. Incident will be logged." She froze. The engineer kept his seat. Meanwhile, Sky Shield's transparency portal had gone global. Within 72 hours, 57 countries logged inquiries. In Nairobi, a human rights attorney wrote, "Could we implement something like this for public housing access?" In São Paulo, a journalist posted a story titled "The Digital Watchdog That Made Airlines Listen." It trended for 2 days under Vucom Justiça. Back in the States, Elias moved quietly. He wasn't chasing headlines. He was fortifying infrastructure. Lauren entered his office. "United Arab Emirates wants a licensing deal. Australia wants to pilot it on 2 carriers. Approve licensing. Hold the pilot. Why let them build the expectation first? Then the protocol feels like relief, not regulation." Lauren smiled. He didn't manage products. He managed perception. In Atlanta, a young father boarded a flight with his biracial daughter. At the gate, the agent hesitated when she saw the 2 first-class tickets. Then her screen lit up. Passenger matched to confirmed booking. "Ethics protocol prohibits reassignment without consent." She smiled stiffly and waved them through. The father didn't say anything, but he knew. Sky Shield had his back. In a high-rise in Seoul, the CEO of Air Polaris studied a heat map. Red areas signaled crew-based bias. Yellow marked seating disparities. Green signaled compliance flow. His COO stepped in. "How accurate is this?" "It's not predictive," he replied. "It's responsive to bias patterns we never tracked before. So what's the business case?" He leaned back. "You don't build loyalty with miles. You build it with dignity." They signed the Sky Shield Charter that afternoon. Elias received the confirmation at 4:17 p.m. He looked out at the capital skyline. Sky Shield wasn't just policy now. It was a proof of concept, a working model of equity encoded into logistics. That night, a TikTok clip went viral. A white flight attendant leaned over to a young black man in 3C and said, "You might be more comfortable in economy." He replied calmly, "Sky Shield's watching. Are you sure you want to say that again?" Her face changed. The caption read, "She backed off. I kept my seat." Thanks, Dr. Monroe. 5 million views in 36 hours. In the Sky Shield server room, a dashboard pulsed quietly. Real-time behavior maps, flagged interactions, passenger gratitude logs. Lauren stared at one in silence. A message from Jakarta I boarded without fear for the first time in years. I wasn't stared at. I wasn't moved. I just flew. Then came the unexpected knock. The UN Human Rights Council sent an invitation. They wanted Elias to speak at the Global Digital Equity Conference. He said nothing at first, then typed, "Only if the agenda includes systemic accountability, not just access." They agreed. The world was no longer just watching. It was adapting. In a Los Angeles news studio, a panel debated the rise of Sky Shield. One anchor asked, "Is this the beginning of a fairness industrial complex?" A civil rights lawyer shook her head. "No, this is the end of plausible deniability. For decades, the problem was always invisible. Now it's traceable, quantifiable, and that changes everything." In Toronto, a woman posted a photo of her daughter smiling in a plane seat. The caption said, "She used to get bumped every time. Not anymore." Sky Shield made her visible. Comments flooded in. Same, me too. No more Row 26. It wasn't a movement. It was a network of change. In a federal office in D.C., Elias reviewed international compliance applications. 47 countries in queue. Lauren whispered, "We need a second team." "No," he said. "We need a second system." She raised an eyebrow. "What sector public education?" She blinked. "You're serious?" He looked up. The skies fixed. "Now let's ground fairness in classrooms." 3 weeks after Sky Shield was certified as Global Aviation Protocol, a letter arrived at Elias Monroe's office. It wasn't from an airline, a regulator, or a senator. It came from a middle school principal in Columbus, Ohio. Typed in black ink on district letterhead. It read, "Dear Dr. Monroe, we've watched what Sky Shield has done in airports. Our students live in a world of hall passes, lockers, and lunch lines. But they too are rerouted, overlooked, and sometimes downgraded. We ask, humbly, can your system work in schools?" Elias held the letter for a long time. No algorithms, no data sets, just a human request. The next day, he flew to Ohio alone. No security, no press. When he arrived at Roosevelt Middle School, the principal, Delia Harris, was waiting at the door. "We don't need flash, Dr. Monroe," she said. "We need fairness." The tour was short but revealing. Lockers with worn-out handles, posters about anti-bullying curled at the corners, cameras in every hall but blind to the small, daily inequities. Delia pointed discreetly at a cluster of students. "That boy gets flagged for disruption every week. But look closer. He finishes his assignments early and gets bored. His teacher logs disengagement. He gets detention." Elias watched. A pattern, not of malice, but of misinterpretation. Back in D.C., Elias gathered his top engineers. "We need to repurpose Sky Shield." Lauren leaned forward. "For education, yes. Same architecture. But instead of seat maps, we track referrals. Class movement, escalation paths. Call it Hall Shield." "No," Elias said. "Eyes sharp. Call it Equity Track." The first prototype launched quietly in 5 schools across Ohio and Georgia. They didn't tell students, didn't alert teachers. They just let the system observe. And in 4 weeks, The findings were undeniable. Black boys were 3 times more likely to be sent to the principal's office without documented misbehavior. Latina girls were flagged as non-compliant, more often when seated near white peers. ESL students had lower participation scores in classes where no bilingual support existed. It wasn't just bias. It was behavior embedded in bureaucracy. Elias didn't present the data in a press release. He flew back to Roosevelt Middle School and showed the report to Delia in person. She read silently, then looked up. This is what we've been trying to name for years. Elias said nothing, just slid over a new dashboard. It was labeled Insight View. Each teacher now had real-time metrics on escalation trends, student sentiment, and classroom balance. Delia blinked. You gave us a mirror. Word spread fast. By month's end, 23 school districts requested onboarding, not to shame teachers, but to support change. One superintendent said, "We have anti-bias training. We have diversity pledges. But this gives us proof." CNN aired a special titled From First Class to First Period, How Elias Monroe Brought Accountability to Classrooms. In it, a teacher from Atlanta admitted, "I didn't realize I'd written up the same kid 4 times in 1 week. But Equity Track showed me. And I finally asked why, instead of just punishing." A high school senior in Oakland posted a video. "They used to say I had an attitude problem. Now my teacher sees I ask questions because I care, not because I'm confrontational. Caption equity isn't a poster. It's a process." At the Department of Education, murmurs turned to movement. Lauren walked into Elias's office. They want a national pilot program, 30 districts, full funding. Elias nodded. "We don't just audit now. We advise. We teach the system how to correct itself." In a school board meeting in Detroit, a white parent stood and asked, "Is this just another way to say our teachers are racist?" Delia responded calmly, "No, it's a way to ask. Why do we treat kids differently for the same behavior Equity Track doesn't punish? It reveals." Applause followed. Meanwhile, on social media, the impact was growing. Sky Shield had now birthed Equity Track, Fair Desks, and Just Schools. One viral tweet read, "We made sure airlines couldn't quietly downgrade us. Now we're making sure schools don't quietly erase us." Late one night, Elias visited his old high school in Atlanta. He stood outside the gym where he once got suspended for defiance after correcting a teacher. He whispered, "I wasn't defiant. I was right." Behind him, the school's new admin building lit up with a glowing screen. It read, "Equity Track Live." Back in D.C., Lauren brought him a note, handwritten, from a 7th grade girl in Columbus. "Dear Mr. Monroe, they don't move my seat anymore when I raise my hand too much. Now my teacher calls me curious. Thank you for fixing the quiet things." Elias smiled softly. They were no longer invisible. They were tracked, respected, heard. It began with a call. From Geneva, not a news outlet, not a regulator, but the International Council on Human Systems. "Dr. Monroe, your Sky Shield framework has been nominated for a Global Ethics Architecture Award. We're hosting a summit in Zurich. We'd like you to speak." Elias hesitated. He never built Sky Shield for awards. He built it to prevent the quiet erasure of dignity. Still, he said yes. Not for the applause, but for the platform. The summit hall in Zurich glittered with diplomats, technologists, educators, and civil rights leaders from 42 countries. On stage, surrounded by LED backdrops and sleek furniture. Elias stood alone. No slides, no notes, just a boarding pass in one hand and a middle school referral slip in the other. This is where it started. He began. A seat taken, a voice ignored, a life rewrote. He held up the pass. I was told my presence made someone uncomfortable, so I was asked to move. Not for safety, not for protocol, for preference. Then he raised the referral slip, and this 12-year-old marked as disruptive for asking questions. He looked out over the crowd. Bias doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in spreadsheets and protocols, and if systems don't track it, they enable it. The room erupted in a standing ovation, not just for the story, for the structure he built. After the talk, a delegate from South Africa approached him. We've been tracking racial inequities in hospital triage data. We need Sky Shield's logic. A minister from Sweden added, our immigration offices are seeing pattern-based delays. Can you help map them? An official from the UN whispered, we'd like to discuss global adoption for refugee screening processes. Too many are treated like threats before they're even seen as people. Elias didn't flinch. He simply said, send me the data. We'll build from there. Back in Washington, something bigger was forming. Lauren placed a folder on his desk. The White House wants a summit. Elias blinked. What kind? A National Ethics Alignment Forum. Education, aviation, healthcare, transport. They want Sky Shield to chair it. He didn't smile, just nodded. Let's convene the system. 3 weeks later, in a chamber once reserved for budget hearings and war strategy, Elias stood at the head of a long table. To his left, the Secretary of Education. To his right, the CEO of a major hospital network. Across from him, representatives from TSA, Amtrak, and 3 airline giants. He began with one sentence. Ethics is not a slogan. It's a structure, and structure must scale. For the next 6 hours, the room unpacked the Sky Shield standard, passenger equity index, classroom referral pattern mapping, service access audit logs, escalation justification dashboards. They weren't debating theory. They were confronting infrastructure, the kind that rewards bias when untracked, the kind that punishes difference in silence. By hour 7, a consensus formed. That night, CNN aired a headline. Sky Shield becomes Federal Compliance Model Airports, Schools, Hospitals to adopt national ethics metrics. But outside of policy, something else happened. People began adjusting their expectations, not hoping for kindness, but requiring accountability. Gate agents checked their screens twice. Principals double-checked referrals before suspensions. Nurses asked questions before assuming pain tolerance, because the system was watching now, and the standard had shifted. Meanwhile, corporate boardrooms scrambled. One Fortune 100 CEO asked her DEI officer, "Are we Sky Shield compliant?" The officer stammered, "It's not required for us yet." The CEO replied sharply, "It's not about requirement, it's about reputation." She knew something others were starting to realize. Dignity is good business. Back in Zurich, Elias received a hand-delivered letter at his hotel from a 14-year-old girl in Istanbul. Dear Dr. Monroe, I used to whisper to my mother that I was scared to board flights, not because of flying, but because of being seen. Last week, a stewardess smiled at me and said, "We're Sky Shield trained." I didn't understand what it meant at first, but now I do. It means I'm not invisible. Elias read the letter twice. Then he placed it beside the one from the janitor. They were no longer isolated notes. They were a chorus. Lauren joined him by the window that night. Below, the lights of Zurich shimmered like stars pressed into pavement. She raised her glass. "You reprogrammed reality." Elias didn't toast. He whispered instead. "We gave reality a feedback loop." In the skies above, a flight captain made a quiet announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this aircraft is Sky Shield compliant. We thank you for flying with us and for flying fairly." The cabin clapped, not because it was novel, but because it was now normal. The winter morning was still when Elias Monroe returned to the place where it had all begun. Terminal 6, Gate 14, first-class boarding lane. No press, no escort, no agenda. He wasn't flying today. He was just watching. Across the concourse, a black woman in her 60s walked through security, holding her purse tight and her boarding pass tighter. A gate agent paused, looked at her screen, and then smiled. "Welcome, Ms. Hampton. Seat 2A. First class is just ahead. No second look. No check with the supervisor. No awkward shuffle. Just ease." The woman blinked, relieved, then grateful. Then she walked through, unaware that the man who helped make that moment possible was standing just a few feet away. Elias smiled quietly. The system had remembered. In the month since the Sky Shield standard became global protocol, transformation rippled far beyond aviation. Schools reduced unjust suspensions by 41%. Hospitals revised triage systems to eliminate unconscious bias. Even banks began piloting behavior-based audit tools. The phrase Sky Shield compliant had become shorthand for fairness. But more importantly, something deeper changed. People's expectations. They no longer hoped to be treated fairly. They expected it. And that expectation rewired everything. At the FIA, an ethics analyst pointed to the live dashboard showing green-lit metrics across 90% of partner airlines. This didn't happen because people got louder. She told her team, it happened because someone finally built a way to hear them. In a school auditorium in Memphis, a student stood during a listening session and asked, "Is it fair that someone had to build Sky Shield at all?" Her teacher hesitated, then nodded. "No. But what's fair is that now we all get to be part of what comes next." At a tech conference in Seoul, a speaker ended their presentation with a single slide. It read, "Not all heroes wear capes. Some just build mirrors." The audience rose in applause. Elias wasn't there, but his reflection was everywhere. Meanwhile, on a quiet Sunday, he returned to his grandfather's grave in Atlanta. He knelt, pulling from his coat a sealed envelope. Inside a printed page, the official certification memo. Sky Shield Standard. Now federally mandated across all passenger systems. He placed it beside the headstone and whispered, "You told me to raise the standard. We raised it so high they can't lower it again." That same day, across the country, Sky Shield's passenger portal hit 1 billion page views. A child used it to confirm her grandmother hadn't been downgraded. A veteran used it to file a report without fear. A young Muslim man used it to thank a flight crew because they treated him like a human being without hesitation. The system had become invisible, but its effects were unmistakable. Like air pressure. You couldn't see it, but it lifted everything. Elias declined interviews. He refused awards. He believed the system worked because it didn't revolve around him, but people still found ways to remember him. One artist painted a mural near Reagan National, a black man in a navy coat, standing in a terminal. Behind him, The words, he didn't take the seat back. He gave it to all of us. On the 1-year anniversary of the Aurelia air incident, a video was posted anonymously. It showed Barbara Cheney walking through an airport. No script, no music, just her moving freely. No delays, no sidelong stares, no whispered reassignments. The caption read, "This time, she landed with dignity intact." At 3:00 p.m. that day, an international broadcast began, a press conference at the United Nations. The Secretary General stood at a podium and declared, "We are adopting the Sky Shield Protocol as the gold standard for passenger rights, bias audits, and ethical compliance worldwide, not because it is perfect, but because it is possible." He paused, and because for too long, equity was a dream. Now it's a system. Back in his office, Elias watched from his window. The streets moved below, unaware of the speech. But he didn't need ceremony. He needed permanence. Lauren entered quietly and placed a small package on his desk. "It's from the Department of Education," she said. "They've adopted Equity Track as a national standard." He opened the box. Inside, a hand-carved plaque from a middle school class in Columbus. "Thanks for tracking fairness like it matters. Because it does." He didn't cry, but he didn't need to speak either. That night, he walked through the National Mall under a sky filled with stars and commercial flights blinking overhead. Each light was a path, a journey that, 1 year ago, could have begun with injustice. Now each one flew under the quiet cover of accountability, and millions traveled with dignity they didn't have to earn. He paused at the reflecting pool, sipping tea from a paper cup. No fanfare, no noise, just peace. Then his phone buzzed once. A text. From an unknown number. "They tried to move me today. Sky Shield flagged it. The agent stopped. He apologized, and I kept my seat. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't even flinch. Thank you for building something that listens." Elias smiled. The sky had changed, and this time, it stayed changed. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.